It was really the tale of two races in this one. The first half of the race, oh my gosh, in like 45 laps or so, we had 7 cautions. 7 cautions. The track record is 9 cautions, but then the second half of the race, the only caution we had was for the stage break at the end of stage 2. We were green the entire third stage. When I say the tale of two races, I genuinely mean it. But yes, the race at Sonoma, usually a pretty tame race, a pretty normal race, a uneventful race in terms of incidents and whatnot. Far from it today. We saw tons of guys go off track. We saw 7 cautions or 5 cautions for cause. We saw guys going off track. We saw Austin Cindric almost flip. That wasn't a caution, ironically. We saw a last lap incident between Ross Chastain and Kyle Busch, which Fox never showed the replay for. So they got that going for them. And we saw guys running out of fuel as they came to the stripe. It was the most eventful Sonoma race that I can remember in a long time, just from the incidents, from the crash fest portion, from the guys running out of fuel at the end. But that third stage, we had our normal Sonoma, long green flag run, but we had different strategies throughout the field, fuel mileage, and that's ultimately what it came down to. Chris Buescher, Martin Truex Jr., and others were on a certain strategy that had them pit early with about 35, 40 laps to go. But then we had guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, who had stayed out a little bit longer. They had pitted at the beginning of stage 3, or actually at the end of stage 2, right before stage 3. So they would start stage 3 at the back of the field. So it was Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, who dominated the first half of this race, and Kyle Larson, who would eventually, as we'll talk about, won the race. Now, Chastain, Elliott, Larson, they were able to slice and dice through the field, but Reddick struggled in traffic, and that ultimately cost him any shot at the win. Now, we saw this first group, the majority of guys, as I said, with Buescher and Truex, who led that pack. They ended up with pitting with about 40 laps to go, as I said, maybe a little bit less, let's call it 35. And then we saw that second group, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott. But Ross Chastain ended up being with that first group. That confused me a little bit. But as for Larson and Elliott, they ended up pitting with about 25 or so laps to go. They had fresher tires so they could come back up through the field. They knew they couldn't hold on to the lead. They knew that they couldn't make it on fuel. They just wanted to run longer so they could have a shorter pit stop, less fuel in the car, and also, have fresher tires. Well, up front, Chris Buescher, who had won stage 2 thanks to altering strategies. We saw a lot of strategies that were hard to keep up with because of all the cautions. But ultimately, Buescher at one point assumed the lead of this race. Martin Truex Jr., who spun out early in this race, who had a problem, was able to rally back to second. Buescher was able to win stage 2, pick up 10 valuable regular season points as he is on the bubble, and this was a big points day for him. But Buescher was able to get back out front with about, as I said, 25 or so to go after Larson and Elliott pitted. And Buescher was 2 seconds ahead of Truex, and it seemed like it was going to be, can Larson get through the field and can Larson catch Chris Buescher? Well, then all of a sudden, here comes Martin Truex Jr. He's a second behind. He's half a second. He's on Chris Buescher's bumper, but Truex just couldn't get by. And Martin Truex Jr., a super clean racer, he's not going to bump and run him. And that's ultimately kind of what hurt Truex's chances at the end here, is that Truex, if he had gotten by Chris Buescher a few laps early before Larson got there, he could have had a shot if Buescher held up Larson a bit. I think ultimately Larson would have caught up and won eventually, but it would have been a lot closer. But Truex, he's a clean race car driver. He's an old school driver. He's not going to rough you up for the win. He's not going to bump you. He's not going to door bang you, but ultimately, Truex raced Buescher with respect and waited for Buescher to make a mistake. And finally, that mistake came from Buescher at turn 10. Truex was able to get side by side with him. They ran side by side from turn 11 all the way to turn 2. And Truex got by Chris Buescher. Then Larson got by Chris Buescher. And it was Truex versus Larson for about a quarter of a lap. Truex slipped up at turn 4. Larson was able to get back by. And then ultimately Larson got by, and he stayed ahead of Martin Truex Jr. Truex tried to make it interesting, stayed within a second for the majority of that final run, but then on the last lap, Martin Truex Jr. runs out of fuel. I mean, what? This is the second week we've seen a contender up front who we did not think had fuel issues run out of fuel. It was never talked about, it was never questioned, but Martin Truex Jr. ran out of fuel and he finished somewhere in the 20s. Contended for the win today, overcame an early issue with the spin, and finishes in the 20s. Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain had a last lap incident, which, as I said, we had to wait like 20 minutes after the race to see it on NASCAR's social media accounts, and Fox never showed the replay in the post-race show. So that was disappointing, but Kyle Busch desperately needed a good day, was running in the top 5, and he got dumped by Chastain. Here's the video. And ultimately, that cost Kyle Busch, and he ended up running out of fuel coming through turn 11. So Kyle Busch ends up finishing in the 20s, I think. But ultimately, as I said, the first half of that race, don't get me wrong, I'm all for a little strategy shake-up, some different guys up front and whatnot. You know, we saw different guys, Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland up at the front of the field. We saw Chris Buescher, AJ Allmendinger. I mean, the majority of these guys run the top 10 at some point today, the majority of the field. So I'm all for a shuffle up, but there was a point where it was like, all right, guys, this is getting silly. Let's get back to normal. And they got back to normal by stage 3, and we saw our normal Sonoma shakeup. Let's look at the finishing results here. Kyle Larson, I'm 95% sure he's about to get the regular season points lead back. He scored stage points. He won the race. It's his 3rd win of the season. It's his first road course win since Watkins Glen in 2022. His 2nd win in the next-gen car at a road course. He ties William Byron and Denny Hamlin with 3 wins on the 2024 season. As I said, he gets the points lead back, I'm pretty sure. He wins his home race. Kyle Larson, we expect him to be fast each and every week, and he was fast once again this week, qualified in the top 5, ran extremely well. And when it came down to getting stuck in traffic, he was able to slice and dice better than anyone else. And the strategy worked out in their favor. They had the fresher tires at the end, and Kyle Larson picked up his 3rd win of the season. Disappointing weekend a couple weeks ago at Charlotte and Indianapolis, but ultimately, obviously, he has recovered from that. I don't even know why I'm bringing that up, but he gets his waiver back on Monday. Sunday, he's back in victory lane, back celebrating once again. 2nd place was Michael McDowell. He was top 5. He was going to finish top 5, but he did have some help there with Martin Truex Jr. running out of fuel for this runner-up. But once again, as I said, Michael McDowell, always a great road course racer, was in the top 5 that whole last stint there, past Chris Buescher there with about 6 or 7 to go. And McDowell takes advantage of Truex's late issues and was able to finish 2nd. A great finish for Michael McDowell. He's a long way out in the points, so I think it's going to come down to a win for him in terms of making the playoffs. But Michael McDowell, as I said, we always expect him to run well at these road courses. In a 2nd place finish, it's no shock. 3rd place, Chris Buescher. After yesterday, I would have never guessed that he would keep that top 11 streak alive, but he finishes 3rd here. They played the strategy right. They had some decent race pace in that car, and they were able to hold on to a 3rd place finish. Won a stage today. Huge points day for Chris Buescher today. They were barely in the playoffs entering today. I know we still have a long way to go before the playoffs start, but they were only 10 or so points ahead of that cutoff, and we saw guys like Chase Briscoe, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, guys below the cutoff line have problems. Chris Buescher went above and beyond in terms of taking advantage of it. Scored 40-ish, 45-ish points on the day with the stage win, finishing in 3rd. Absolutely a fantastic day for this team, a much-needed run. Great day for Chris Buescher. 4th place, Chase Elliott was with Larson for the majority of this race, but was behind him for the most part. Was running 6th, 7th at the end there, and Truex runs out. Kyle Busch spins out and runs out of fuel. Chastain spun out Kyle Busch, so Elliott was able to sneak on by. Chase Elliott sneaks the top 5 out of this thing. They continue to run extremely well at all different types of tracks. They've been extremely quiet in the way they do it. They don't lead a lot of laps. They've only won 1 stage on the year, but I think Larson and Elliott are going to end up being 1-2 in the points after this race. 5th place, Ross Chastain ruffled some feathers today. Ross Chastain, you are so back, baby. Chastain went a while without ruffling any feathers, but today he just wiped out Kyle Busch, fighting for a top 5 spot on the last lap. But Chastain had speed all weekend long run, short run, qualifying. A much-needed top 5. I feel like it's been a while since they've been like consistently top 5 in speed. Chastain's always been a good road racer, so no shock to see him up there. 6th place, AJ Allmendinger. We always expect him to run well at these road course events, and was in the top 10 for the majority of the day that this race was normal. Great day for him. 7th place, Ryan Blaney. This is the most speed I've seen from him at a road course in I feel like a long time. Blaney has that win at the Roval in 2018, but top 5 on the speed charts most of the weekend. Strategy didn't play out as well as I thought it would, but they ended up finishing 7th. Tyler Reddick, 8th, dominated the early stages of this race. Won stage 1, led 50 or so laps in this race, but ultimately they just couldn't get through traffic as well as Larson, as well as Chastain, as well as Elliott, and they were stuck in the 20s. They ended up rallying, getting some of it back. They finished 8th with the last lap shenanigans, but a disappointing result for Tyler Reddick considering how much speed they had early on. I know it's still a top 10 good points day, but they should have been contending for this win. 9th place, Christopher Bell, the best finisher for Joe Gibbs Racing, and oh my lord, Joe Gibbs Racing had a day. We'll talk about the other 3 later. We're going to have to wait a while to talk about them later, but Christopher Bell, good top 10 result for him. 10th place, Todd Gilliland, on the week of his contract extension, was in the top 15 all day long, was running 11th, 12th there at the end, took advantage of the last lap shenanigans, and finishes in the top 10. Great day for Todd Gilliland. 11th, Corey LaJoie, a great day for Corey LaJoie. Was on that strategy with Elliott, Larson, and all of them. Was able to come back from that late pit stop, and he was able to get a top 15. Really good day for him. Kyle Busch, 12th. Okay, so it's not as bad, but they did lose 7 or 8 points in the process, which for them could be critical. Kyle Busch, everything has gone wrong for them the last 3 weeks. This week, running top 5 on the last lap of the race, you just have to make it half a lap, get spun out by Chastain, and then you're still limping at home in the top 10, and you run out of fuel. Last week at Gateway, are in position to score a good amount of stage points, have top 10 speed, and you get wrecked by Kyle Larson. The week before that at the Coke 600. I don't remember what happened to them at the Coke 600, but the week before at North Wilkesboro, taking out Ricky Stenhouse Jr., getting punched in the face. It's been a rough few weeks for that team. They finally had some speed. They finally had things going their way, and in half a lap, it collapsed. So they finished 12th. Curious to see what the point standings are, but should have been better. Brad Keselowski, 13th. For him, that is a fantastic result at a road course. 14th, Daniel Suarez had top 10, even top 5 speed at times today. They end up 14th, 15th, Alex Bowman, 16th, Zane Smith. Good day for him. Hocevar, 17th, Priest, 18th, 19th, Jones, 20th, Bubba Wallace, 21st, pole sitter Joey Logano. Pitted during one of those early cautions after leading the first 10 or 15 laps of this race. Was back in the field and got clipped in one of the silly wrecks. And, that damage they could just never recover from. 21st, 22nd, Austin Cindric spun out like 3 times today. 23rd, Kaz Gralla. 24th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 25th, Harrison Burton. 26th, Noah Gragson. 27th, Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. also cannot catch a break. Luckily for him, he's top 5. Well, maybe now it's top 10 in points, but Truex has been in great position to win, in great position to finish top 5, and something goes wrong. Martin Truex Jr. had an easy coast to second place in this race, and then on the last lap, runs out of fuel and makes it over the line by literally this much. I mean, he was going 2 miles an hour at the end there. Last car on the lead lap, and 27th, I guess at least he finished, but Truex should have had a better day. They should have got more fuel in that car, I guess, but Martin Truex Jr., an extremely disappointing result. He spun out early in the day. They rallied back. The strategy worked out to where they had a shot at the win, and they run out of fuel, even though they were going to have a fantastic result today at one of Martin Truex Jr.'s best tracks. 27th. Extremely disappointing result after a great day, or a great rally, I should say. Hemrick, 28th. John Hunter Nemechek, 29th. William Byron with a disaster of the day. 3 or 4 spins, and then he had a mechanical problem or something late. I'm not 100% sure, but he finishes 30th. Will Brown, it was a rough day to be an Australian in the NASCAR Cup Series field today. Will Brown, alternate strategies got him up just outside the top 10 early in the day. He was 11th or 12th, but then the mechanical problems struck. They had some ECU practice issues during practice and qualifying, or I should really specify during qualifying yesterday. It really ruined his qualifying run. They started 24th, and as I said, they were able to get up to 11th or 12th, and the ECU problem struck once again, or some other sort of mechanical problem. He went multiple laps down, and that was all she wrote. I hope he's able to come back for another start because, once again, they had the speed early in the weekend, but the mechanical problems ultimately ruled the final result there. So hopefully Will Brown gets another chance because I feel like he could have done much better, obviously. But mechanical problems ruined him, and we'll talk about Cam Waters here in a second. 32nd, Josh Berry was involved in a wreck. 33rd, Justin Haley, he had some sort of mechanical issue. They never said what it was on the TV. 34th, Chase Briscoe had a transaxle issue. 35th, Cam Waters got up as high as 13th in the alternate strategy, was actually running extremely well, extremely competitive, got involved in a couple wrecks, had some suspension damage, and they end up finishing 35th. I'm going to say the same thing for Cam Waters here. I hope he gets a chance to come back, show how competitive he is, how good he is, because this weekend just was not it for him. Spun out in practice, had some issues today in the race getting involved in some silly wrecks, and he ends up finishing 35th. 36th, Austin Dillon, and then here is the rest of the Joe Gibbs crew. This was the Joe Gibbs racing day from hell. Martin Truex Jr. looked like he was going to finish second, runs out of fuel, finishes, 27th, and he spun out. Ty Gibbs on like lap 20 of this thing, clips the inside wall at turn 11, breaks the right front. That was his day. Denny Hamlin on lap freaking 2, his engine exploded. That cost him the regular season points lead. And also, just what a weird thing. We don't see engines expire that much anymore in the year 2024, but I mean, did he miss a shift? Did the engine just get something in it? Did it not want to work today? I mean, the engine just completely kaboomed. It was weird, man, but Sonoma today was on something else. The big pile up at turn 11 because of the bad block from Barry. And then we saw just a bunch of other silly incidents. And then we saw fuel mileage, apparently. We saw different strategies. One of the more eventful Sonoma races for sure. Sonoma as a whole has always been the most difficult road course to pass at, I feel like. And the next-gen car, it's still difficult to pass. It's still difficult to make certain moves. But this was one of the better Sonoma races, I felt like, in terms of the actual racing. Once again, the wrecks got too silly and, the ending was a little bit, before the strategy and stuff, it was a little bit boring in a sense, but I did like the intrigue of the late race strategy. Larson catching up to Truex and Busher and Truex having a little bit of a battle there. So better Sonoma race than normal, but let me know what your thoughts were on this race. Let me know what your thoughts were on just everything. There was so much to break down here, but thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. We got more to talk about. We'll do our normal, the Monday after live stream tomorrow night. But yeah, I'm sure I missed a lot in here, so we'll have a lot to talk about tomorrow night with all the different incidents. It was hard to talk about them all, but thanks again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video or tomorrow night's live stream. I hope you can make it.